This episode of GenreVision is brought to you by our premium subscribers at patreon.com/GenreVision. If you become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month, you can get access to all of the bonus material we make for the GenreVision network of shows. That includes GenreVision, FinFlix, Third Time's the Charm, and additional material that we make exclusive for Patreon. Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Dietsch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And welcome to GenreVision in 2021. We are kicking off the year with a theme month. This theme is around one of our favorite character actors, John Lithgow, in a month we're calling Lithgowing, Lithgone. And we wanted to kick the month off with a movie that both Travis and I had not seen before. And we went with Ricochet, the 1991 action thriller cop drama.
Yeah, it's all that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's all that and a bag of delicious chips that we will get into. Before we do that, our call to action to kick off this year is simply thanking you, listeners, for making 2020 as terrible a year as it was. You all made it a great year for GenreVision.
Yeah, in terms of unique downloads, this is the best year we've had. As a matter of fact, it was, I think, almost twice the number of unique downloads from the year 2019. So in 2019, we had just over 27,000 unique downloads from our primary host. And in 2020, that number was 52,870. So nearly 53,000 unique downloads. And that's thanks to you, listeners. That's all we have to say is just thank you so much. I mean, if you want to see the graph, I'll be willing to put it on Twitter. But yeah, you all listened and downloaded a lot in 2020. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
We can't thank you enough. But this first movie of the year, the first movie of our theme month around John Lithgow performances, this is Ricochet, directed by Russell Mulcahy, who I think most people will know as the director of Highlander. Go listen to our Highlander episode. And this was one that I put out there and was kind of the impetus to do the theme month, because I'm like, I've heard of this movie in passing. Doesn't really get, trumpeted, like people. It doesn't feel like this movie has a big cult following, but whenever somebody mentions it, it's always extremely positive. And I'm like, well, it stars Denzel Washington and John Lithgow, and they're in a good guy, bad guy, extreme relationship. It can't be all bad. Well, Ricochet really sets us up for the goods in the title sequence.
Yeah, well, look, obviously nostalgia plays heavily into this because Drew and I grew up in the 90s. But 90s movies really had a different idea of how to show their titles on screen and how to do their opening credit sequences. So not only is this a really fun design, for a credit sequence, very, very simple, very effective, high impact graphics and lots of whooshing and clanging, which is also, again, very, very typical of 90s intertitles and opening title sequences. The music by Alan Silvestri is immediately awesome. Just great.
I mean, this entire opening with these very particular rectangular designs, the tiles, it immediately made me think of the Saul Bass opening for Psycho.
Sure.
And the music is also just is equally oppressive, terrifying thing. I mean, when we were doing our screening, you immediately said, "Is there a shark somewhere?" Because it sounds like it's going for Jaws gusto.
Well, I mean, there's this very simple string ostinato, dun 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 dun, and it's like, okay, this is very Bernard Herrmann. This is very John Williams. It's very akin to what Silvestri was doing in Predator, in the bigness of it, and also, maintaining that sense of like, yes, this is going to be a scary action film, and it is. Like, it really delivers on that tone consistently, and Silvestri's score is a big part of that. So after we get our opening credit sequence, we meet our main character, Nick Stiles. He is he's just a cop, in a blue uniform. We see him in Los Angeles, but he has greater aspirations. He's got a degree in, I believe he is a lawyer, and he has greater aspirations to get off the street and actually join the DA's office and become a prosecutor.
Yeah, when we first meet him, he is engaging in a basketball game with none other than one of our favorite actors, Ice-T.
Yeah, Ice-T playing Odessa.
Oh my God, and he's so fucking good in this. They're in the middle of a basketball game, and immediately the dialogue of this movie is so snappy, but also two-fisted. Like when we were having our screen, I said like this script was written with two fists, and you commented that they were just punching the keys until it came out, and it's perfect. It really sets you up for exactly the kind of tone that this movie's going to go for, which is this is pulp. This is, in a weird way, so classical in its approach to dialogue and the quickness of it that it could be read as parody. And I think that's a bigger thing that we can talk about with the movie in general. But the reason it never slips into that is that the movie is never laughing at itself.
Right, yeah. Well, the movie is fun and certainly funny, but it teeters, I think, so dangerously at times, and the danger is part of the fun. It teeters dangerously on that knife's edge of like falling right into parody. And because it's able to maintain its position on the very tip of that knife's edge, it becomes sort of an exciting watch. Like, this could drop the ball and like go full tilt wacky in a bad way at almost any moment. But because it's maintaining this like, you know, optimum zone of like silliness, it's like, okay, this is super, super enjoyable. Clearly you already know how we feel about this movie.
Oh, you trust me. Our feelings are only going to increase.
At this point, like I was telling Drew earlier, I was like, the list of crazy shit that happens in this movie that's like noteworthy or like worth talking about, it would actually take longer to tell you all the wacky shit that happens in this movie than for you to watch the movie. So listen, find Ricochet. You'll have to pirate it. And I'm, you know, it pains me to say that because I want to pay money for this movie. But here's the thing. It came out in 91. It was one of a very few early movies to actually hit DVD. And it was the home video rights were controlled by Warner Home Video at the time. This was one of those weird HBO movies that was actually put out into theaters, like Mom and Dad Save the World.
Go listen to our Mom and Dad Save the World episode.
You know, clearly the rights for this movie are in sort of an odd place. I couldn't find it streaming anywhere, even though there were certain places saying that you could. And it was like, it's nowhere. It's really difficult to find. I'm sure you can find DVDs of it out there, but it's never been released in a home video format that I think is proper, because like you and I found a 720p copy of it that had been recorded from a TV broadcast, clearly, because the film was shot in scope, you know, so a super widescreen format, you know, anamorphic lenses, but it had been cropped down in most of the movie down to 16:9 widescrreen, which HBO was notorious for doing just up until like a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, we don't normally talk about that as far as like the acquiring of these movies at times, but this is an instance where, yeah, I'm as soon as they announce a good release of this, even if it's just digitally, I will buy this movie.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we will talk about some of the crazy stuff that happens in it, but I want to say that this is the kind of movie that GenreVision was born to cover. Like, not only because of its notoriety, but I would lump this in. This is not my shelf pick, but I would lump this in with something like The Boxer's Omen.
Right. A true hidden gem where it's like, okay, this is just like underneath the status of cult movie, where if it was a little bit more popular, I would call it a cult film. But it's now in the sort of underappreciated gem status. Like, you have to see this thing that I found. But there's something about it, I think, that despite being full of like really recognizable and popular actors, like it's just crazy enough that it would sort of fall out of favor.
Let us make something abundantly clear at the beginning and the outset of this. This movie is so trashy in the greatest of ways. In their 2 thumbs down review of it, as I'm reading off of here, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert described it as ridiculous, goofy, embarrassing, unsavory, and distasteful. And with the exception of embarrassing, I'd say Travis and I agree with all of those descriptors, but not in a negative way.
Yeah, that's all true except for embarrassing. I don't know who would be embarrassed because this stars Denzel Washington. He's doing great work. He's an A-lister movie star for the reasons you see in this film. He is just so intensely charismatic and so watchable. And he's given some incredibly silly moments in this movie, but you know what? There's not a single one of them I disliked watching.
He sells it all. And where his character climaxes is that, I mean, it's that perfect description of what you're talking about, where he is literally standing on the edge of parody. Like,
yeah. Well, there's a moment, you know, after the prologue of the film where he's a cop on the street, like he does get the job with the DA's office and he's now a prosecutor, and it cuts to him in the courtroom and he's trying a serial killer that they call the Night Strangler. It's just a kind of a smaller plot thing, but, he's doing the movie lawyer thing and he's right up in the jury's face, which is not a thing that happens in the courtroom. He's right up in the jury's face and he's making this very dramatic closing argument. And then he goes quiet for a moment and then goes, ah, and screams right in the jury's face. And I'm like, this movie is fucking crazy. You know, like, this is such improper conduct, but the fact that the movie is trying to pass this off as its reality, it's like, okay, I'm invested in just how like outright goofy this is going to be.
Well, for how good Denzel is in that scene, I told you, when he's doing the movie lawyer closing argument speech, to which we have barely any context. It was like, okay, because this movie just speeds by in the best of ways. He is so good that I said to you, Denzel Washington could convince me to watch Junior again.
Sure.
That's how good he is in this. Like, so charismatic wise, on point. Denzel is doing everything you want out of Denzel. And because this is when, you know, he's very young and hungry. Like there's a hunger to him in this performance where he is willing to tear down every scene he's in, you know, with his teeth, because he knows it's going to make an impact and be memorable. And it is. So
and he's willing to look silly. He's willing to look silly because he does stuff in this movie that's like, he actually wouldn't do that today because it would actually affect people's conception of him as this like super, you know, like masculine idol who takes himself very seriously, like
dignified.
This is a different Denzel.
Oh, I mean, and it is incredible. So plot wise, he starts off as this beat cop and he's at this like festival, and at the same time, there's this crook who's going to do this like double crossed heist on this deal that's going down. And it is, of course, John Lithgow. And Russell Mulcahy, who, if you listen to our Highlander episode, Russell Mulcahy is the kind of director I wish we could see more of in mainstream film, because yes, he's doing things that are calling attention to the direction, but they are never poor decisions. The introduction of John Lithgow's character, his name is Blake. He is shrouded in shadow coming out of this car, smoking a cigarette. The only light you can see is beaming through his crazy red hair.
Oh yeah, they gave him like a Pacino Godfather 3 brush cut, but like dyed so red.
But so this camera just dollies in to this shadowed figure, and as it reaches his face, he turns around, and it is, if I was writing a textbook on like how do you introduce a super villain into your movie, it's this moment.
What I love about Mulcahy when he's like doing his best work, and I would argue, I would say that this is like an argument that this is Mulcahy's best film, is like when he is doing good work, he seems to have a mastery of the understanding of movement and rhythm, the sort of, I don't know, the sort of intangibles that a lot of directors either have no interest in or don't really conceive as part of their filmmaking vocabulary. Like this film, obviously, I think is more hyperkinetic than so much of what we watch, but it's not hyperkinetic to the point of, let's say, you know, Paul W.S. Anderson at his worst. Even though, you know, a guy like Paul Anderson would have taken a lot of inspiration from this guy, you know, but Mulcahy doesn't do things like movement of the camera for movement's sake. He understands that there is going to be an implication and an emotion brought out of, say, moving the camera in a certain way or pushing in or moving across the room in a certain way. He understands all of those things. And here it's all on display so beautifully that we instantly know how to feel about a character the moment we are introduced to them in close up. we know who this character is. It's the bad guy.
I think this is one of the greatest examples for a movie that we've done on GenreVision. This is a movie that I would put on the pedestal when we talk about flow, because flow is this kind of nebulous term when it comes to movies or any kind of sequential art form. And flow isn't something that one aspect of a movie can achieve on its own. It has to be all of the instruments working together. And Mulcahy's filmmaking flows in wonderful ways. I think a lot of filmmakers rely on editing for flow. And flow can be attached to pacing, but it's not just pacing. It is about the rhythm of a piece. And there is such a beautiful, beautiful rhythm to Ricochet because of the way that Mulcahy is utilizing his cinematic language, the editing. The script itself is pretty much written to be a snappy, punchy, flowing piece of pulp fun. Mm-hmm. And the music. I mean, music obviously seems like it would play a big sense in this, but Silvestri, this is some of my favorite stuff in terms of maybe not on its own, but in tandem with these other elements. This is some of my favorite Silvestri work.
Yeah, I mean, this is so much of what we love about film as an art form, and that it takes other art forms and combines them into this format where ideally there is synthesis, where things, like you said, are working together in concert to produce flow. And the filmmaking has sort of a musicality to it. It's like listening to a pop song on the radio and you're going, oh yeah, this for whatever reason feels good to listen to. It creates pleasurable sensations in my brain. And that is what Ricochet, I think, does in its opening few minutes, is establish that, like, oh, this feels good to watch. It feels locked in.
It's so trim. And I don't know, there's multiple story credits on here, one of them being Fred Decker. But the final screenwriting credit is given to Steven D'Souza, who, we've done, he did Commando, go listen to our Commando episode.
Die Hard,
Die Hard, go listen to our Die Hard episode. Street Fighter, go listen to what I will eventually get on this show is Street Fighter. There is a clear snappiness and a desire to play to a classical sense of storytelling, to the point where later in the movie, a character, the film White Heat with James Cagney is playing on. And it's the perfect film pull for this movie because it speaks to the kind of tone and style that this movie's trying to capture, not just thematically or in a pastiche way. Like, it's channeling that specific kind of energy. And in this opening sequence in which Denzel Washington stops this double-cross shootout that John Lithgow's character Blake is a part of, it's comedic to a sense because John Lithgow takes a hostage and Denzel Washington strips down to his underwear while a bystander is filming this on this giant, shoulder-mounted camcorder.
So silly. And what's crazy is, like, Lithgow's character is clearly, like, really unhinged. She's, I'll fucking kill her. I'll fucking blow her head off. And Denzel, meanwhile, he cuts the reverse angle and Denzel's just taking his clothes off.
Super calm.
What is this?
Well, this is Lithgow month, and we have to talk about John Lithgow's performance in Ricochet, in which, and this is a rare occurrence, ladies and gentlemen, in which Travis is the one who said he is the Joker. Normally I'm the one who's making the DC illusions. At a point in the movie, what happens is, because of this, Denzel is able to shoot Blake, and he is arrested and put away in prison. And he is, becoming obsessed now. He's like, I'm going to, it's a Cape Fear thing where It's like, I'm going to get out, I'm going to destroy this man's life. But the way that it's presented here is so comic book villain. There's no other way, in my opinion, to read the movie other than, I think this movie owes a lot of influence to Tim Burton's Batman in terms of the heightened relationship of the characters.
Maybe, it's also one of these movies, like we talked about the credit sequence earlier, and one of the things that makes that credit sequence so pleasurable to watch is that you keep seeing name after name that you're like, oh shit, they're in this movie? And then the next name rolls up and you're like, Oh shit, they're in this movie too. So Lithgow goes to prison, and then he gets to meet his cellmate, who is none other than Jesse Ventura. Oh shit, Jesse Ventura's in this movie.
Right. Another Predator connection. And he's this super tattooed, Aryan guy. And because this person was filming the hostage situation and eventual arrest of Lithgow, it's been played on because there's a big part of this movie is about the media and how it shapes certain narratives for these characters.
Right. Denzel's character becomes a celebrity cop weirdly, and then becomes a celebrity attorney, which is strange. You see his face in the cover of all sorts of magazines.
Well, this all takes place in Los Angeles, so he's just this rising public figure. Mm-hmm. And so when Lithgow gets to prison and meets Jesse Ventura's, I was like, "You're that guy that got arrested on America's Funniest Home Video."
You're that guy that got arrested on America's Funniest Home Video.
And then Lithgow responds with, "Fuck off," or so "fuck you, cream cake." That's not even the best dialogue. To which then he beats down Jesse Ventura and establishes dominance, and we're like, okay, well maybe that's that scene is you want to prove that your villain is awesome, have him beat up a stronger
Jesse
a
the
big
Body
guy.
Ventura.
But then we're like, okay, well that's going to be that. No. This first act and change is cutting back and forth from Denzel continuing to rise in the Los Angeles political system, going from being a cop to becoming a very successful lawyer to becoming the assistant DA. Meanwhile, Lithgow is just seething and planning his revenge. And we cut back after he has physically assaulted Jesse Ventura in their cell. And there is no other way to describe this. A prison fight with phone book armor and pipe katanas in what looks like it's not, but it is stylized like the final warehouse fight scene in Highlander.
It is so insane. So if somebody had told me that this movie contains a pipe katana fight to the death between Jesse Ventura and John Lithgow, and they're both wearing phone books for armor and in like a prison fight, I would have said like fuck off. Like no.
That can't be real.
Certainly not. Turns out it's very real, and it's in this movie.
And it's great.
Why aren't you watching this movie right now is my question to you, dear listener. Thank you so much for downloading this podcast. I wish you were not listening to this podcast at this very moment and you were watching Ricochet.
I wish you were writing and contacting the people at Warner Media to get them to release a proper aspect ratio HD version of Ricochet.
Right. Yeah, this movie needs restoration, remaster. Like, it's a good-looking movie.
It's a very good-looking movie. And
yeah, Mulcahy shot the hell out of it, and it deserves a better format. It deserves its proper original theatrical format.
And so you would think, well, I mean, pipe katana phone book armor fight, it's all downhill from there, but it's not. It's not. It gets better.
Denzel hasn't even put on the pink bathrobe yet.
Oh my gosh. So eventually this is going to be, it's very clearly kind of a Cape Fear thing where it's like, okay, he's plotting his revenge in prison. He's doing all this stuff. Like he does these, maniacal things of making tons of copies of Denzel's photo in the prison copy room.
It's just so many delicious, like crazy push-ins on John Lithgow's like dead face and his milky eye. You just know that this guy is going to get out of prison and fuck Denzel up so hard. And what was crazy to me at this point is I had a realization. I was like, oh my gosh, they're actually giving me the impression that they're spending more screen time on Lithgow than they are on the lead.
Well, and in retrospect now, that was very clearly calculated and part of the smart script flow, the finalized version of what we saw, because Lithgow is very, very heavily featured in like the first half or so, more so than Denzel, I would say. And then the back half is more focused on the disintegration of what he's doing to Denzel. This is a really, really well-crafted movie in what it's trying to achieve structurally.
So after all of this is, established and Lithgow is clearly developing a plan to fuck Denzel's life up, then we have this prison break. Which delivers again one of the most insane moments in a really crazy movie. So I didn't realize just how violent this movie would be. Like, obviously, Jesse Ventura was just impaled on a pipe katana, so it's pretty clearly
the bar's been set.
Yeah, so I didn't know exactly how Lithgow's character was going to stage this prison break, but the method in which it goes down was nothing short of stunning. He gets in front of his parole board, and as soon as the parole board has him there, Lithgow suddenly whips out this, I don't know.
No, but before that happens, great bit of dialogue in which they do, it's like, what would you do if you would get out? Like, how would you be a better citizen? And John Lithgow looks at the guy, he's like, well, first I'd pay a visit to your house. And the guy's like, oh, to thank me? He's like, no, to fuck your wife, your daughter.
And your dog.
Maybe even your dog. And then, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the kind of I love that Lithgow gets to play this kind of character. And it's a character that we continually don't really see anymore in villain setups. There is nothing redeemable about this. This is a character that is written to enjoy being evil.
Right. He's a monster's monster. He's clearly just like totally amoral. Like there's a lot of interaction between this character and the Aryan Brotherhood. Like he establishes, dominance over Jesse Ventura's character by killing him in pipe katana combat and sort of leading the Aryan Brotherhood gang in prison. And then when he gets out, he's still using the Aryan Brotherhood connections to his advantage. But they never, ever established that this guy actually believes in anything that the Aryan Brotherhood believes. He's so devoid of a belief system that he'll just do anything.
His only belief system is fuck up Denzel. That is the only motivating factor to his character. There's nothing else. No family, no romance, no moral question. It's just whatever it is to fuck up Denzel. So this parole scene, he he says the line about, fucking your wife, daughter, and dog. And then he produces like a little pin gun, which shoots a single bullet into the head of the main parole board guy. Then the other prisoners break up and it becomes like a fucking Friday the 13th movie condensed into 15 seconds.
It's a power tool massacre that is so brutal and so nasty. You blink and you miss it, but it is insane. Like somebody gets a small handheld circular saw to the chest and it's just spraying blood everywhere. And then some other guy gets like a huge drill bit to the neck. It's like, whoa, pump the fucking brakes. This is crazy. There's only so many times like I can say like, this is insane. This is crazy. Oh my God, I can't believe it. It's so violent. Holy shit. You have to get the impression by now. This is must see, like for GenreVision. Like this is right up our alley in terms of what it does, for our tastes. Like
I mean,
for there gourmet.
For being the first movie of 2021, I mean, to reference another movie we did last year, this is hard target levels, and in some ways, this might exceed it because a big element of this, and this might be a reason why there might have been an avoidance of treating it well as a piece of the catalog, is like we said, this is an extremely trashy, seedy, nasty movie because when Lithgow gets out, now it's going to be like, all right, I'm going to completely dismantle Denzel's character as a public figure, as a father figure, as a family, and he starts to destroy this guy's life in so many just absolutely sick ways. And I'm saying sick, like not like sick cool, like sick as in disturbing.
Right. He doesn't just want to kill him. He really wants to fuck this guy's life up and dismantle him psychologically. And some of the ways in which he does that are actually surprisingly funny. Eventually, there are some ways I think that would be controversial today, but like eventually he does abduct Denzel Washington's character, drug him, creates a sex tape of Denzel in a certain non-consensual way that we won't get into. But Denzel's performance as drugged up Denzel, it's immediately clear that Denzel knows this is not a prestige movie. He's going for like, all right, I understand the tone of this, and I know that this isn't some operatic tragedy.
This is comic book. Like I think I said to you that this is like if Frank Miller had a sense of glee. Like of like positivity.
If Frank Miller understood joy, this is the kind of story he might write.
Yes, yeah, like this is the kind of story he would make, which I think is phenomenal. There's a couple moments I do want to highlight because this is a theme month around Lithgow. I do want to highlight one of my, I mean, every scene is my favorite scene in this, but one of my favorite scenes is he disguises himself as a Los Angeles electric employee.
Yeah, he cuts the power to Denzel's home.
Oh my gosh. And this is just a scene of pure menace in which Denzel is at this fundraising event for this children's community center that he's helping to build. And meanwhile, Lithgow is at the home with the babysitter and Denzel's 2 daughters. And you're like, oh man, like he's here in the middle of the house. Like, what's he going to do? It's so menacing. And he's just playing this nice person. And he stages a little birthday thing for him where they get to blow out the candles. And he has this wonderful supervillain moment where he's been given this milky eye. And one of the little girls is like, your eye is funny. And he's like, no.
Oh, it's my magic eye.
Yeah, he's like, and the camera gets super close up on his face, which if you ever need somebody who could teach lessons on how to give good close up, it's John fucking Lithgow. This close up on him as he pulls his lid down and says, this is my magic eye. I can see what people are thinking with it. It's like, this is a comic book supervillain in every sense. Like the only thing these characters are missing are capes and tights.
You know, it's so interesting that a guy like Lithgow publicly seems to be a really like genuinely super dude. And this is, I think, something that's going to return later on in the month. He just seems like a really wonderful, nice person. And I realize that, you know, I don't try to idolize celebrities in any kind of way. And we have to be very careful with that. But he plays evil so well. It's amazing. You know, he had one like really awesome turn on Dexter as a serial killer in the 4th season. And he won a lot of acclaim for that, and rightfully so. He's very good, but my God, he hasn't, to my knowledge, played a villain like Earl Blake throughout the rest of his career. There are other villainous turns that we're going to talk about this month. You know, Cliffhanger. He's the villain in Cliffhanger, but holy shit. This is top tier Lithgow. This is among the upper echelon of Lithgow performances.
I would say it's certainly that. In a more subgenre category, I'm arguing that this is, of the ones I've seen, his best villain performance. Like, it's that good. It is so arch. And the movie knows it. This isn't a case where the actor is playing against the tone of the movie and creating a dissonance. Everybody is on the same page as far as the heightened levels that the story is engaging in. So some other plot stuff. I mean, it's not only that he is framing Denzel for this seedy act. Before that, he manages to murder one of Denzel's associates at the DA's office. It might have been the DA, and frames him as a pedophile.
I think Lindsay Wagner's character is the DA.
Okay, so yeah, it's one of his like associates at the DA's office, like one of his colleagues. And this starts off this thing that Lithgow has put in place where it is framing it that, oh, all of this charity that Denzel's been doing with children, it was really part of this insidious pedophile thing that him and this other associate were doing. And when I'm talking about this being a scummy thing, I understand that might be part of the reason why Warner Brothers has kept it under the rug, because this movie is not afraid to be really gross. Like, I can't believe I have to say this, but maybe this is something that should even be out there as a warning for some people. There is a shot in this movie where somebody opens a briefcase and we see the covers of supposed child pornography magazines.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is trashy. There are even things like we see John Lithgow's character is so obsessed with dominating Denzel's lead that he'll put photos of Denzel's head on, you know, the bent over photographs of like pornography actresses, like asses and, you know, genitals fully in the air and Denzel's head on them. Like, they really go for, like Siskel and Ebert said in their review, like, it's tasteless. It is in poor taste and exploitative. This is in many ways an exploitation film,
for sure.
And the air of exploitation, and I don't really have a fully well-constructed argument for this yet, but I think exploitation allows us to put some distance from the kinds of horrors that are depicted in exploitation films. Like they become, I think, better contextualized through exploitation in that they become inherently sort of silly. You know, this movie is so deeply silly and, you know, like Siskel and Ebert said, goofy, that it becomes difficult to see, you know, any of these acts that Lithgow's character performs as like anything a real person would do. because he's just so arch. He's just such a movie monster.
Well, that's why I continually am beating the drum of super villain. This is a super villain. This is not like a real approximation of an actual character like that would exist, and neither is Denzel's character, frankly. Where it eventually goes.
The method that Lithgow's character uses to take down Denzel psychologically is so stupidly elaborate that no real person would actually do it. But it makes for a compelling story. And I love that there is, despite it not being a mystery, there's still a compelling heart of caring for our central cop, like who we've seen as like a super likable guy in the most like movie simple way, just really deeply watchable at all moments. Like every single frame of Denzel on screen is just like, magnet, just so magnetic. But his disintegration as a character, and as we see him like sitting around the house in a pink bathrobe, drunk as fuck, talking to who he thinks is his therapist on the phone, actually John Lithgow. That never comes up again in the movie.
No. You're wrong. He was talking to his therapist or doctor, but John Lithgow had a bug.
Had the bug, right? Okay,
yes.
Yeah, the bug was glued onto the table. Yeah.
No, so here's the thing. This is I said to you when we were watching it that as far as the method of revenge, it immediately reminded me of Old Boy, where it's like it is this elaborate plan to destroy one man's life. And it's so elaborate to the point that it's like, this is total fiction. Like, if you're going to sit here and argue that this movie's bad because it doesn't make sense or that it's just too elaborate, you're missing the point. Mm-hmm. What this kind of story offers us a chance to do is take this to such ridiculous levels that it becomes entertaining. And what I love is that this is not a movie without things on its mind. This is not just pure pulp fun for pure pulp fun's sake. There are ideas in here that I think are worth highlighting. One of them is the fact that Ice-T, remember we talked about him, is introed in the beginning, and Denzel and him are playing a basketball game, and they have dialogue saying like, look, we're playing this game, but we grew up together, but you're clearly in the world of crime, and now I'm in the world of law, and our paths can't meet. And immediately I was like, oh man, that's like, stereotype type stuff,
When we do see Ice-T's character is running what looks like what could be like a crack manufacturing lab or a meth lab, something.
That set is so over the top. I love it.
It's very theatrical. There are sorts of like odd light sources coming from like really strange places, and it's all basically designed to look very much like a theatrical set, and stupid and silly and just so overwrought hilariously. And it does come back because in order to match the elaborate nature of the villain's plot, Denzel has to construct a stupidly elaborate plot of his own to vindicate himself, because now he's been publicly shamed, which is worse than just him winding up dead, obviously.
I do want to reiterate something, because Travis has used the word stupid twice in the last minute or so. Stupid is not an inherently negative descriptor when we're talking about this stuff.
No, this is not going about things in a surgical, intelligent way.
No, and that's okay, because every part of the movie, every molecule of it is clicked in to that goal.
Yeah, it understands so clearly what it is.
And so, yes, this elaborate plan is basically going to be that Denzel's going to stage his own public suicide, in which he's standing on top of a building. He starts quoting White Heat, top of the world, I made it. He's also, because he knows the media is going to be there, he's like, "Oh, I got to put on makeup." So he's got this, powder brush.
He just wants to look as crazy as possible. So he's got a powder puff, and he's powdering his face, and he's smearing red lipstick all over his mouth, and ranting and raving and hooting and hollering. And he's basically just putting on a display so that Lithgow's villain character will see this and go, "Oh no, he can't like jump off the building and die. That would ruin my revenge plan." Like, the whole idea is that Denzel would stay alive and suffer, because that's what Lithgow's character wants.
Yeah, well, and because the idea is like, okay, I was, shut away for years and years, and I was just getting started off as a crook. So I want his humiliation and his degradation to last for years, like it did for me in prison. Mm-hmm. And so when Lithgow shows up and sees he's going to jump off, he's walking through the crowd, like saying this out loud, which is so great. Like, let me back up for just a second and to again spotlight exactly what this movie knows what it's doing, and to deflate any argument about, realism or whatever. When Lithgow originally escapes from prison, there's a scene where Denzel and his associate are walking out of the courthouse steps, and there's a homeless man that is, begging for change, like, oh, come on, can't you give me something? It's so very clearly Lithgow. Like, we know this.
Yeah, because the face is covered up, yeah.
Yes, his face is covered up, his voice and everything. And, the Denzel gives him something like, here you go. And then they walk past the camera. The camera dollies it again and pushes in so that Lithgow can reveal, take off his hobo mask and reveal that he is John Lithgow. Now, of course, you're saying, like, why is he doing this in broad daylight when he is, in the story, he's faked his own death, like, so that people believe that Blake is dead, so that when Denzel starts telling everybody, look, this guy Blake is trying to set me up, he sounds crazy. But that's what's great about this kind of a movie is that, yes, if you were doing the very straight-faced, realism take on this story, a character having a moment where he can supervillain reveal himself in the middle of the public, when Denzel is like 5 feet away from him, is like, yes, that's dumb. In this movie, it just adds to that comic book heightenedness of like, yes, go fuck up Denzel's life.
Well, about half of this movie's running time is mugging, and it's awesome.
It's great.
It's awesome. Yeah, this is, in terms of like the GenreVision oeuvre, if you want to take a look at of sort of what we did last year, because we covered so many library titles, you can go to my Letterboxd account. I can share a link for that at genrevision.com on the post for this episode. But I did a ranking of all the kind of stuff that we watched last year that was library titles. It wasn't any new releases. This is going to be up there with the library titles and definitely in the top 10 of this year for sure. This is a very good movie. Specifically because I'm talking about the sort of GenreVision house style. Like, this is so up our alley. It's so wonderfully silly and violent and has such great performances in it, and is for sure the best directed film in Russell Mulcahy's filmography
that we've seen for sure. You posed that question to me yesterday when we screened the film. You said, like, is this his best movie? And it's like, well, it's got to be this or Highlander as far as popularity. But I think I can assuredly say, of the Russell Mulcahy movies that I've seen, Ricochet is the best.
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to find out what else is out there kind of like Ricochet, you would probably go to The Shelf. Here on GenreVision, we have this collaborative event that's always ongoing called The Shelf, where we find other things on our shelves and pull them off for recommendation or sometimes for substitution. If you want to add a shelf pick of your own, you can always do that at genrevision.com and find the post for this episode and leave a comment in the comment section with your shelf pick.
If you do comment with your own shelf pick, we will feature it on the next episode.
Drew, what are you pulling off the shelf to recommend as a pairing with Ricochet?
I wanted to really find another gem. There was a real desire to me to find, because this was the greatest definition of gem. Like, finding this movie and watching it. It's exactly what I kind of love about searching through library titles. And what I always try and do is, like, I want to find these kinds of movies. And there is another one, and it is another HBO movie that was originally intended for theatrical release, but then eventually just went to HBO. This is Livewire from 1992, a year after Ricochet. Stars Pierce Brosnan. This is a wild movie in which Pierce Brosnan is like I think a bomb disposal police officer of some sort. And the plot is that the evil supervillain bad guy has a magic water that if people drink it, they become living human bombs and start exploding.
Okay.
That alone should be enough to sell you. But wait, there's more. There's also a bomb disposal robot named Madonna who actually has a thing for Pierce Brosnan, and even, I believe, at one point fondles him and is trying to, I guess, get with Pierce Brosnan. There is a moment in this movie that is one of the best things I've ever seen in a movie, in which there is a clown who I believe is a villain who has got the bomb water inside of him, and he is in a wheelchair, and he is being wheeled out in some public space, and he is going to explode. And the way this goes down, I can't even properly describe it, is so awesome and so beautiful. Watching this clown scream, and then the camera gets closer in his eyes, and his eyes start to fill up with blood as the bomb magic is turning him into a bomb, and then this clown in a wheelchair explodes. There's a reason why movies are my favorite art form. And it's moments like the exploding clown in Livewire. There's some other treats to the movie that I won't spoil. It's another one. I think this one you actually can rent. It is out there and accessible, unlike Ricochet, which is kind of crazy to me considering that Ricochet has more, prominent movie stars in it. This is another one. Livewire is another one where I'm like, how are people not talking about this movie? This is another one that demands a cult following. So track that down. Livewire, starring Pierce Brosnan. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf?
Well, another movie that features Ice-T in a prominent role and also features some really well-executed homages and elements of blaxploitation is a movie called New Jack City, directed by Mario Van Peebles. And boy, is this movie good. This is another gangster cop drama, and Wesley Snipes' performances do not get much better than New Jack City. Wesley Snipes plays the main bad guy in the film. This is another film that just has to be seen. It obviously takes itself a lot more seriously as a drama than something like Ricochet would, but it still understands its role in using blaxploitation and other exploitation genre elements. It is a really excellent film, and if you have not seen it, it is time to do so.
Well, let's head over to the listener shelf picks for our last episode on Wonder Woman 1984. Funny enough, Stephen Nesbella went with Superman 2, and Eric Johnson went with Superman 3. So I definitely think the discussions about this being connected to that era of superhero movies is apt. Eric Fuchs went with What Else But Wishmaster. I love Wishmaster. And Mr. Milksteak went with Batman Returns and Captain Marvel. And we will always encourage people to watch Batman Returns. Let's do some currently consuming.
Nom 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
Very briefly, I wanted to talk about Pixar's Soul, which is now available on Disney+. It hit on Christmas Day, and this movie had been getting good reviews. Everything that I was reading about it seemed promising. And I, looking at the trailers, thought, well, this is going to be a tough sell as a kids movie because it's about a black jazz musician living in New York City who appears to have this very, sophisticated internal life, and he dies and is in a coma, and his soul goes to the great, sort of afterlife, and the score is written by the Nine Inch Nails guy. And I was like, this is a children's movie that you're trying to make? Is it? And I thought for sure, if this is going to be released in cinemas, it would be a tough sell. Turns out it wasn't going to be released in cinemas because 2020 happened. And so it became this, it's an all ages movie. I still don't know how good of a children's movie it would be. I suppose there are certain things that children might like about it. It's pretty funny, but in a way that I think, in Pixar fashion, there's a lot of humor that would probably be more oriented for adults. Like there's this really funny joke, I'm not even a sports fan, but there's a funny joke that reveals that, why the New York Knicks have been performing so poorly. And I was like, okay, that's a really clever joke. And I actually think it would go over a lot of kids' heads, but this is in so many ways about appreciating life as an adult. And there is a character that is almost sort of a child surrogate in there, but it's played by Tina Fey, and it becomes apparent very quickly that this is not a child surrogate character. And I suppose there are some sort of elements that might make kids laugh, but it's not a children's movie. It's an all ages movie, but it's pretty fucking grown up, and it's also excellent. It's really quite good.
Yeah, I mean we're gonna do our top 15 episodes for our Patreon at patreon.com/GenreVision. And I'll spoil you right now, Soul is definitely on my top 15.
Same here. It's very, very good. If you haven't seen it already, it's a little heavy.
It's rough. Rough in the sense that it gets very profound. My favorite Pixar movie is Inside Out, and this is
great.
in that exact same vein in terms of the emotional kind of wavelengths it's trying to hit, and how abstract. Like, it's dealing with really abstract ideas, which is that's why animation is such a great forum to do that with. And I think Soul takes really good advantage of that.
And it doesn't take all of these abstract ideas and boil them down into really cutesy things all the time. Like, sometimes these abstract ideas are embodied in like really difficult.
Oh, the zone is one of my favorite things. Like, when they talk about that, that's beautiful.
Yes. There's some really, really cool shit in this movie. All right. That is all I got as far as currently consuming. I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Well, I saw a movie called Shadow in the Cloud, which actually you told me about. I had not really known about this, in which Chloe Grace Moretz plays this is during World War II. She's hopping a ride on this plane in New Zealand, this Allied plane that's making a trip, and she's got a special package, and unbeknownst to them, a gremlin is going to decide to try and screw up their flight. I've always wanted this movie in terms of I've always wanted the World War II Gremlin movie, because that's, where the idea of gremlins kind of propagated. And the movie opens with this really cute kind of educational cartoon about gremlins. And it's like, gremlins became gremlins because of the Joe Dante movie. But this idea, like from the Twilight Zone episode and appropriately for John Lithgow, the same segment in the movie, I always liked what about a World War II set Gremlins thing? There's a sequence in Heavy Metal that does that. I was like, how's nobody made that movie? Well, they did, and this version of it, it's okay. It's not bad, but I think that it's got way too much stuff going on, and its particular idea in which that the majority big chunk of this movie is just Chloe Grace Moretz in the gunner turret while a lot of the movie is going on. So most of the movie, she's talking to the other characters only through their headsets, while she's seeing all this, she sees the gremlin and is telling them like something's here, but then she can't talk about that. There's this other story where she's got a secret package. So it's like, oh, what's in the secret, package that she's telling everybody that can't be opened, and all this kind of stuff. It's a little too stuffed.
There's a lot going on. Now, the director, Roseanne Lang, who I think does a bang up job with the film visually. She finds ways to make Chloe Grace Moretz in a confined space, for like 45 minutes look and feel interesting.
It never gets boring in that regard. She finds a lot of interesting and varied angles for this one very tight claustrophobic setting. I do want to say the monster, the gremlin itself, looks great. It's a great creature.
Yeah, it was a Weta design, a Weta digital effect as well. And for a low budget movie like this it comes across as really great. And the film is never better than when it's focusing on creature horror. It's a really fun creature horror movie. And I wish that I think when it's focusing on the creature horror stuff, it feels like a fun creature horror movie should. But there are other elements that the film diverts to and tries to focus on that, while fun, they, I think, do away with the best elements of the film, and it ends up being more of a mixed bag than it should. Roseanne Lang has a credit on this. She rewrote it. Some asshole wrote the first draft on spec on this one, and then they've changed it. From what I understand, they've changed it quite a bit to be in its current format, and that's fine. I do think refocusing it around the creature stuff was maybe more an expensive endeavor. I don't know. For a low budget film, this certainly feels very effects heavy.
It's 1/3 a good movie. That's how I kind of feel about it, is that when it is focusing on the creature horror stuff with the gremlin, it's very good, but it's also like, I don't think the drama works in the big picture, and it's World War II fightery action stuff goes to places that, I mean, they spoil it in the trailer, which I think is terrible. It's goofy and fun, but I think actually wars against the tones. There's like 3 different tones and 3 different movies going on. And this is an instance where, that can work, but in this instance it doesn't. And yes, I'm speaking from a place of bias. Like, of course, I wish they just focused on the monster part of it, but that is the part that is pulled off the most successfully. And I wish it was better.
Yeah, there's some further plot intrigue stuff that I think helps keep the movie going when there's not a whole lot that's going on other than Chloe Moretz sitting in the bubble turret. And you can tell that the movie hasn't given you all of the adequate information in the first act. You can tell that the movie is holding something back. And so I think that kind of thing can be used to hold your attention to go, well, they're eventually going to explain that little inconsistency, or they're going to eventually fill in that little bit, but they're making sure to keep me watching until then. So it's just holding off on little things. And of course, I think the eventual reveals just aren't all that interesting.
No, it's a great contender for a movie that I'm like, it's there. The pieces are in place to do something good, but dang.
You know what? It's really funny. Looking at the IMDb credits on this, the last credit in the thanks list, it's the filmmakers wish to thank Serge Tankian.
Okay. I mean, cool.
That's the singer from System of a Down, if anybody's wondering.
Yeah, he's. I like Serge quite a bit. I don't know. I know he does film score stuff, so I don't know if he might have participated.
Maybe in some way, but
in a small uncreditable way.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
but hey, cool. Serge is awesome.
I hope Roseanne Lang gets a really good movie out of this, because I think she did a great job at this. Like, my immediate, very cynical thought, and it's almost a thought I wish I didn't have, but it was like, oh, they're going to get Roseanne Lang on The Mandalorian season 3 like that.
Sure, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the thing. You said you were like, oh, I'm going to pay attention to what she does next. And I'm like, I am, but I'm sorry. Like, it's going to be if it's genre based. Like, if she does some, talky period piece that's like really static.
Sure, if she does an indie drama or something like that, otherwise, I'm not going to be interested in unless, it gets really, really well reviewed. Like, but if she makes another horror movie, sign me up.
Yes. I mean, if she does something that really focuses on the horror, because when this movie's doing, like you said, when this movie's doing creature horror, it's singing, and she's a big part of that.
Yes, for sure.
So I would love to see her do another genre product. And if she does, I will view it sight unseen, because I really think she's got some real promise that showcases. But let's wrap things up with our
comment of the week.
We have a very, very special comment of the week this week. Loyal listener Stephen Nesbella this is actually something we should probably talk about on FinFlix as well. At some point, his daughter has become a loyal listener of FinFlix, and he and his daughter, they watched Wonder Woman 1984, and his daughter gave her critical opinion on Wonder Woman 1984, in which she said, Wonder Woman has the same problem as Anaconda. I wanted to see Cheetah, but I kept getting that Max Lord guy saying, what do you wish for all the time? Like that guy with the weird voice kept stealing all the scenes in Anaconda. There needed to be more Cheetah. Here's what I adore about this comment. It's well thought out, like she has formed her opinion extremely well, and she's disagreeing with our read on Anaconda, in which we were like, oh, the whole movie, more Jon Voight, please.
Yeah.
So I am so over the moon that she loves FinFlix, and that we are, if even a tiny, tiny part of forming her critical approach to movies and art. That is, I can't even put into words how that makes me feel.
It's a fun, super fun and lovely feeling. So I sincerely hope she did not listen to this episode on Ricochet.
No.
It's not for little ears, and it's not a movie for little eyes either.
No, but Stephen Nisbella, if you are listening, I hope you will let her know that we are so happy to have her as a loyal FinFlix listener, and I can't wait to hear more of her critical opinions. I love it. But we are going to be continuing Lithgow month next week with no movie, any movie after Ricochet is going to be a come down. But this is another one that I've never seen before, even though it was everywhere on TV growing up.
Yeah.
And that's Harry and the Hendersons.
Also have not seen it, and I'm looking forward to any Rick Baker designed Sasquatch costume.
That's true.
That is an element to the film that I know I will be interested in immediately. I'm also interested in Lithgow because, let's face it, he's John Lithgow.
Exactly. So welcome to GenreVision 2021. Hope you're along for the ride. We look forward to having you. It feels good to say this. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Dietsch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we will see you next week.
Right here on GenreVision.